Welcome to the Bluffton Biblecast, where together we embark on an apocalyptic adventure through the prophets and Revelation. Though it's a daunting task, we encourage you to embrace the challenge and find captivating truths from the mysterious parts of God's Word. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jamie Steffen, and today I am joined by Todd Dreyer, Steve Ringer, and Carter Fichter.
Great job on apocalyptic, Jamie.
I was nervous about that one for sure.
It looks like we're starting at the deep end of the pool. Oh, well, let's dive in, trusting the Lord to lead the way.
In thinking about our topic of spending time in the prophets and Revelation, I do have a question for Todd. Why start with Amos? He is a prophet, but his account is in the middle of the prophetic books, and he's really not that well known.
You're right, Jamie. Nothing like kicking off a new year with a book that most people know nothing about. But as most of us recall, the prophets aren't in chronological order in the Bible, and if you put them in order, Amos would be one of the first. And that's why we're starting with him. He was a prophet to Israel with a message of warning about their sin and their coming destruction.
Okay, so he is speaking to Israel, but can you tell the listeners what is happening to Israel in the time of Amos?
Sure, so let's put Amos on a big timeline. He was writing under King Jeroboam II, which was about 260 years after Saul was first anointed king of Israel. So Israel and Judah, they've been divided for a really long time.
260 years after Saul. That kind of feels similar to us today.
Really?
Yeah. The U.S. is about 250 years old, and George Washington seems like a long time ago.
Exactly, Jamie. The early kings of Saul, David, and Solomon are long ago in their minds. And unfortunately, like most of Israel's kings, Jeroboam II was a really evil king and led the people into sin. But his military was really successful, and he expands Israel's borders, especially towards Assyria in the north. And therefore, Israel feels really prosperous during Amos's day.
So here comes Amos, a farmer who is actually from Judah, and God calls him to go north to Israel with a message for the wealthy, comfortable, yet sinful Israelites. And they are not going to enjoy what he has to say.
And remind us, what is that message?
A giant condemnation of the actions of Israel, and God is not happy. This warning is captured perfectly in the second verse of the book. The Lord roars from Zion and thunders from Jerusalem.
That's right, Steve. God is upset with their sin. And Amos specifically highlights Israel's injustice towards others. He uses phrases like trampling on the heads of the poor and crushing the needy. It appears that the rich and the influential seem to be taking advantage of others.
But he doesn't stop there. There are plenty of other sins. Pay attention to chapter 2 as you read this week, where Amos gives a laundry list of problems with Israel. Some of them are a little difficult to understand, but dig in and you will see bribery in the legal system, sexual sin, and idol worship.
And although their sins can be a little difficult to understand, the coming consequences are really clear in a poetic description at the end of chapter 2, like being crushed under a cart full of grain, and the strong losing their strength, and an archer not being able to stand his ground, and the bravest people running away naked.
Right, Todd. There is no chance they will stand against God's consequences for their sin.
So, what will our readers notice when they read the first 2 chapters of Amos?
So first of all, we'll see that Amos doesn't address Israel right away. He starts with the sin and judgment of the 6 surrounding nations: Damascus, Gaza, Tyre, Edom, Ammon, and Moab. Next, he speaks to Judah, who gained their independence from Israel about 150 years before. And finally, at the end of chapter 2, he addresses Israel.
I thought that was interesting. So I dug deeper into the surrounding nations, and I noticed something. When you take a closer look, you see that Israel lies within the center of all the other nations. God's judgment seems to be closing in on Israel with each new prophecy. To help us understand, I want you to picture a target. There's a bullseye, which we will pretend is Israel, with 7 rings surrounding it. Now picture an archer gathering a bow and 8 arrows. He walks up to the line and takes aim. His first arrow hits the top of the target on the outermost ring, which in this case is Damascus. He aims a second time and once again hits the top of the target, but this time he hits the second ring, or Gaza. The third arrow, like the previous two, hits the top of the third ring, Tyre, and the fourth does the same, Edom. We now have 4 arrows directly lined up and inching toward the bullseye. Steve, if you were Israel, how would you be feeling?
I'd be getting nervous, Jamie. I noticed the archer still has 4 arrows in his quiver, and he looks to be very consistent with his aim. That last arrow is going to hit me, isn't it?
Yes, I think it is. And that is what Amos wanted Israel to notice. He was setting the stage for their judgment.
Right, like a noose that gets tighter and tighter around the neck. And when it's completely tightened, there's destruction.
You know, something that caught my eye was a phrase for 3 transgressions and for 4 that you see repeated throughout the first 2 chapters.
I believe the idea here is that of multiplied or repeated offenses. 3 is a full measure of sin, and 4 is an overflow of sin, which warrants God's punishment.
Yeah, it is interesting that he uses numbers 3 and 4, because when you add them together, they equal 7, which is a significant number in the Bible.
You're right, Todd. 7 is a representation of completeness. Like on the 7th day, God rested.
And I think in the same way, Amos is telling the nations there is a full completion of the measure of their guilt. Why do you think Israel's judgment was more severe than the other nations, Steve?
Good question, Jamie. As we look at 2 Chronicles 7, which was in our assigned reading, we see the promise and the curse shared to the nation of Israel before the split, so both Israel and Judah would have been included in this message.
Yeah, but at face value, it sure looks like Israel's getting the worst end of the deal compared to Judah. I can see Israel crying, "That's not fair," as they hear what Judah has coming for them compared to what their judgment is. Why the difference?
To better understand the need for the level of judgment, let's step back a bit and look at what has happened in the past. God put the nation of Israel in a very unique position. He's not only pulled them out of Egypt, gave them a country, defeated their enemies, and made them a nation to be the light of the world, but he did it in spite of their stubborn, stiff-necked, and often rebellious attitudes.
Yes, I think I get it. When given greater opportunity, you should also expect greater responsibility. Like the verse in Luke 12:48, where Jesus was addressing the faithfulness of servants and basically said, "To everyone who has been given much, much will be required."
Exactly, Jamie. Amos states in chapter 3, verse 2, that God has chosen Israel above all the families of the earth to reflect his glory to the world. But they rejected him and will now suffer the consequences of judgment. Amos was called to speak directly to Israel at this point, since they were more ripe for judgment. Judah will get their due later from the other prophets. God always sent his prophets to announce his plans in advance.
Should we avoid or retreat from the opportunities God places in our path to avoid the potential consequences of failure?
Absolutely not, Todd. That sounds like the man who received his talent from the Lord and went and dug in the earth and hid it. He was motivated by fear and selfishness, and not a desire to glorify God. We should rather look for those opportunities with faith and dependence on the Spirit.
Yes, better to look at an opportunity to reflect God to others as a faith-fueled opportunity rather than a fear-filled obligation.
Listeners, as you read chapters 1 through 4 this week, look for the vibrant visuals and pictures penned by Amos as he describes the transgressions of Israel and the resulting consequences.
Yes, like the word picture of a shepherd retrieving from the mouth of a lion 2 legs or a piece of a ear. Very graphic.
Yes, it is. And with all that is prophesied to happen to Israel, is there any hope?
Well, that's a question for next week's podcast. For now, prepare to meet your God, O Israel.